Today's guest on Leave Your Mark is Dr. Charles Simkiovic. He started his concussion research back in 1986 on traumatic brain injuries. He is the inventor of this groundbreaking treatments he uses to heal concussions called cranial movement therapy. Boasting an unprecedented success rate, this breakthrough technique has been clinically proven to restore over 10,000 concussion sufferers and their pre-concussion lives.
Hi there, and welcome. Now it's time for America's favorite podcast, Leave Your Mark, with your host, Vince Cortese.
If it's fly, loose fitted, it's Cortese. If freezing, chubbers in it, it's Cortese.
Leave Your Mark is about inspiring the world, one guest at a time.
Pass the word from Brooklyn to Pittsburgh, from urban to suburb, it's Cortese, you heard?
And here is our host, Vince Cortese.
Today's guest on Leave Your Mark is Dr. Charles Simkiovic, and he is a very unique individual. Thank you for stopping by today to share with us your expertise and your cranial work, and now officially concussion work, and share with us how you got started on this journey of doing what it is you're doing.
Well, I was in practice. I just felt like I wanted to do more, and a friend of mine told me that he felt I would be interested in what they were researching, which was cranial bone movement and the effect it had on how your brain functions. And their first focus was for learning disabilities and dyslexia and ADHD. So they were looking more from an academic standpoint. So I actually went to Brooklyn and joined Dr. Ferrari and Dr. David Pincus and what they were doing. And the first weekend just floored me. It was fascinating. I got to witness a 22-year-old man from Belgium who was a Hasidic Jewish man who never spoke more than a 2-word sentence in his life. And by the third day in English, he said, "Get me off this table right now. I want to go back to the hotel room."
Oh, wow.
In 3 days, he went from not being able to speak to sentences. So at that moment, I realized, okay, these guys are really on to something big. And I was fortunate enough to join them. What we realized is in our attempt to treat learning disabilities and dyslexia, we actually, majority of them come from some kind of trauma, usually physical trauma, such as concussions or repetitive, smaller subconcussive blows to the head. So in doing that, in a search to help dyslexia and learning disabilities, we actually figured out how to treat concussions. And back then, there wasn't not a lot of attention on concussions. This was in 1986. So we've actually been treating concussions successfully now since 1986. And what we did was identify that the cranial bones actually move. And at that time, they weren't thought to move. So we had to disprove that fallacy. The American Dental Association at that time realized cranial bones move. The European Medical Association realized cranial bones move. The AMA did not think they did. They felt they fused at a certain point. But you can actually, in an investigation in Gray's Anatomy on the skull and the articulations of the skull, you can actually see proof just from the way they articulate that they do move.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, the temporal bone where it articulates to the parietal, it's like a big fan, and you can see it actually moving up and down. If somebody chews, you can see the muscles contracting.
Yeah.
So things in the sphenoid bone move. So everything did move. So we had to identify how they move, how they affected the brain, and then if you're hitting the head, what happens? And what are these cranial faults? And there's a whole list of a scenario that can happen with the sphenoid bone. It's critically important. It's the only cranial bone that all the other cranial bones articulate with, which means they all create a joint. And it looks like a big bat. So it actually, as you breathe, the wings move, and it moves everything. Further, your eye muscles attach to the sphenoid. So if the sphenoid's dropped or tilted or not moving, some of those eye muscles could be elongated, some can be shortened, so they create what's called an eye tracking problem. So when somebody who's been hit in the head, possibly, if their eyes aren't tracking, what that means in everyday life is if they're trying to read, they might get really fatigued if they read because it's hard for them to move their eyes, or they might reread the same line over and over, or they could skip words, or it will look choppy to them, which really affects your ability to comprehend what you're reading and read smoothly. Now, if this happens, the way that cranial bones articulate, that will impede circulation from getting to the frontal and midbrain. That can cause short-term memory issues. So now you have somebody who's having a hard time reading, and then they're not going to remember stuff that they do read or recall less of it. So in a testing situation, as in a kid in high school, they may not remember things. And then the greater rings move up and down, so it can inhibit left brain function, which is your logical brain. So reading comprehension can be compromised, or can overstimulate the right brain, which is emotional, which is why post-concussive symptoms can often cause anxieties, depressions, anger outbursts, things like this. Ironically, I was on staff for Duquesne University's basketball team for a while to treat head injuries. And it was pleasing to me because several of the players, after a concussive event, they wanted Duquesne, the head coach was Danny Nee at the time, they wanted this to make sure their heads stayed and performed, because if your brain is working right, your fine and gross motor skills are working right. A lot of the players, once we would look at them and treat them, would come to me and say, you know what, ever since you treated me, I'm reading better and I'm remembering. And I thought, I never told them that's what it was for. It was real pleasing to me that they did notice that reading was easier for them.
So do you have different types of indicators, and it sounds like they're not always the same depending on the patient? Because I mean, what you were explaining there about the eyes and the muscles elongating and things of that nature, I think when we think of a concussion, we just think of a headache or confusion. You don't think that it would affect these other areas that you're mentioning.
Yeah, the symptoms from concussion are wide. There are many. You have pain syndromes such as headaches. They can cause dizziness. They can cause visual disturbances, ringing in the ears, dizziness, nausea, mental confusion, anger outbursts, depressions. Cleveland Clinic now is doing a lot of studies on what concussions cause. Years ago, I said it causes hypothyroidism, and I actually got laughed at. Well, now there's dozens of studies that show that concussions cause hypothyroidism. Now, a lot of knowledge and researchers are saying they feel that concussions can cause ALS, MS, irritable bowel syndrome, erectile dysfunction. And if you really understand the anatomy, the sphenoid moves everything. But in the middle of the sphenoid is a little indentation called the sella turcica, which is where your pituitary gland sits. And the pituitary gland is the master gland. It tells everything what to do organically. It's like a general in the army. It barks the orders. Furthermore, behind the pituitary is the pineal gland, which regulates serotonin levels in the body, which is what's amiss during PTSD. So many of these things are affected by concussions. To take it another step further, the pulsing of the cranial bones pumps a fluid around the brain called cerebrospinal fluid, and I'm going to call it CSF for short. Now, CSF has a lot of roles. One of the big things it does is it removes all the metabolic waste products in the central nervous system. So if you're hitting the head and you decrease or make cranial bone movement diminished, the theory is that a lot of the flow of the CSF is slowed, which means that the waste products aren't being removed at an efficient rate. So they stay in the central nervous system too long. What that can do is over time, if the waste stays in there too long, it can actually kill brain tissue. And proof of that is what we see happening to these NFL players who deteriorate rapidly, like Junior Seau killed himself in the tragedy like Webster. It's a bad scenario. We are setting out to prove that. We just completed 3 research studies with Wheeling University's Doctor of Physical Therapy program. It was headed up by Dr. Mohammed Haddadzadeh and Dr. Christine Grubler. 2 of the students did 2 separate researches, and then I did an introductory research with the 2 doctors. And the results were really fascinating and very good results. The students just presented their research about a month ago and defended it, and that went very well. And we're waiting for the statistical analysis of ours that I did with the 2 doctors. And it's very exciting. And so we know this is going to lead to more research. We want to do more about the CSF flow. And possibly, maybe, theoretically, does that cause CTE? Nobody knows. I mean, now CTE don't detect it till somebody's dead upon autopsy. So this can lead to so many things. We're just really at the tip of the iceberg on the brain, what it does and what concussions do. But the good thing is, for 35 years now, our results have been pretty consistent. We have over a 95% success rate. But as far as injuries, like you were saying, seeing so many different things, we have people coming with a variety of symptoms from concussions. Like we had one guy had a severe concussion, got knocked unconscious. His only symptoms are he can't taste and smell.
Oh, wow.
Meanwhile, I have another guy from Somerset, PA, who fell 40 feet off a bridge onto his face and survived. And his smell came back, and he couldn't even walk because he was uncoordinated. It affected his coordination. severe visual problems. Anyway, he's back to working, and he has a dangerous job. He works in a sawmill.
You are listening to Leave Your Mark with your host, Vince Cortese. Leave your mark. Inspiring the world, one guest at a time.
Now, that's what I want to ask you because of our culture in the sports arena. You get a lot of attention there, but we were talking earlier and you mentioned something about the majority of your patients are pretty much everyday people. You get a lot of moms with the kids in the youth sports and in the high sport, pre-teen sports, and these aren't people that you would presume have the problems with the concussions or the blows to the head, and it sounds like it's much more prevalent than we thought.
Concussions are huge numbers. It's almost impossible to get through life without hitting your head in some form. Like I had a boy played football for University of Pennsylvania, and he got treated, and all of a sudden, 3 weeks later, his mom came in because she had a severe concussion. And while she was here, she said, "Oh, I need this." Then a month later, dad came in because when he was in high school, he was in a car accident where he went through the windshield of his car, lost an eye.
Oh.
So there are a lot of concussions, and families, once the red light goes off, they're like, "Oh my goodness, I have hit my head." And I just finished a girl yesterday who's headed to Grove City College. Next thing you know, her sister came in yesterday, get examined. A tire went through her windshield and hit her in the head when she was in high school. She's lucky she's alive.
Oh my word.
The stories are fascinating. You know, we have a lady from Oklahoma 9 years ago. Somebody attacked her with a hammer and beat her, fractured her skull, brain bleed, and she couldn't walk without staggering. By the end of the week, she was walking heel to toe, frontward and backward.
Wow.
Waiting room with her head against the table, and got emotional because she said it was the first time in years she could feel her head because her head was numb.
Oh, wow.
You know, we have a guy from Philadelphia who 30 years ago was in the military. He was in a tank and a hatch fell and hit him in the head, which is over 300 pounds. He went blind for 2 days and was unconscious for a couple hours. For 30 years, he just deteriorated, and he found his way in here. And he said the only symptom he has at this point, he had headaches, he had visual problems. He's an engineer. It was hard for him to concentrate at his job. He said the only symptom he has at this point is he can feel weather front changes, and he'll get a headache for about a half hour till the front comes in. And so
wow.
acceptable from where he started.
He could be a newfangled weatherman moving forward.
Yeah,
we can laugh because he's healed. So you get, by the sounds of it, these people are coming into you and they're broken. And the idea that you can actually do anything for them is exciting, but to take some of these people to the degree of having their lives back as you've done, this is truly amazing.
If you have a story to share, tell us. How are you going to leave your mark? Contact us. Leave your mark with our host, Vince Cortese. Be our guest.
I met you through bringing my father over there, and my testimonial of watching him and seeing the difference that it made in him, it absolutely amazed me. It happened fairly quickly after the initial treatment or two. The progress began to reveal itself, you know, that third, fourth one and beyond. And it's truly amazing. When I had found out what you were doing, I actually came to the one appointment because I wanted to see. Now, I kind of want to touch on this. So you said when you started back in '86, what were you doing when you met those gentlemen that influenced you to join up with them?
My original degree was a DC, a doctor of chiropractic. And while I love the field, and it certainly helps me, and I feel good, I wanted more. And I was actually enrolled in medical school because I just wanted to be able to do more to help. Before that happened, this doctor said, "I think you'll really like what we're doing." And when you see that kind of transformation in the patient, you're like, okay, this is really, and I'm not having to cut anybody open. I'm not having to give any drugs. I get a lot of referrals from emergency room doctors because a lot of them tell me when a concussion comes in, aside from doing a CT scan to rule out a brain bleed, they want to run the other way because they know they don't have a whole, it's kind of uncharted waters. Nobody really knows what to do. I mean, for years, they just told you to rest. And then in 2016, they had a summit saying, "Oh, we realize rest is not a treatment." Of course it's not a treatment. Rest isn't a treatment. That's doing nothing. But so then they started doing different interventions and physical therapies. But this is the only treatment that actually you treat the injured part of the body. You go to the source. Every other traumatic injury where a part of the body is hit or harmed or broken, you treat the injured site. And this goes back to Dr. Cyriax, who is the father of orthopedic surgery. He said, when you treat the origin of the injury and where this injury, and unfortunately, a lot of the other concussion treatments today don't actually treat the injured site. We actually have an intervention to the head for a concussion. Then a lot of the other therapies work well, like we recommend vigorous physical therapy because we want somebody's diaphragm to get moving and breathing heavy because that helps facilitate the pumping of cerebrospinal fluid to the brain, which helps heal. I have an eye doctor that is very advanced in her therapies with light therapy and vision therapy. She's just very advanced. Dr. Danielle Bianco, she can take my patients and help rehab them quicker after.
Wow.
I had one lady, 90% of her symptoms resolved, but she's still having a little bit of some visual problems with peripheral vision and a little bit of balance issues. And Dr. Bianco, I think, is going to put the icing on a cake and finish, and she's already there and doing well with her and improving. This is the Cadillac for concussion treatment because we're actually treating the injured site, which has not been done before.
So that being where you're currently at, what direction do you see this heading? Does it evolve even more than with the doctor and the light therapy and accelerating the healing? How do you see this playing out a handful of years to come? And with the artificial intelligence to help you measure your results as well.
Well, the good thing is we know we've done these 3 research studies. I did one research study with Duquesne when I was there, which it was an okay study. We did not have a control group, so it's not a great study, but it got good results, which lends you to say, okay, we need to investigate further. We are now looking to present and publish what we did at Wheeling at a slowdown now because of COVID. A lot of the seminars have been canceled or pushed back. So as soon as that opens up, we'll be presenting and publishing, but that'll open up for more concussions studies. The goal is to, once more people figure out that this is really the standard of care for concussions, we need to train more doctors. And we had embarked on that with a fellow named Dan Akers 4 years ago. You think you'll remember his father. His father is Fred Akers. He coached University of Texas.
Okay, that name sounded familiar.
Yeah, he coached Earl Campbell in college.
Oh, okay.
Dan had a son that had struggled, and they flew me down there, and his son is doing remarkably well. Well, Dan was an internationally renowned businessman who said we need to start training doctors and doing this work so this can get out there. Unfortunately, he was working with my wife, who has her MBA from Duquesne. Dan died 3 years ago from renal cancer at 4 years old. So now, we have interest from other groups where, and this has to get out there because it can help so many people. And frankly, once the research is published, I won't be able to handle all the work myself. They want treated and they want treated now.
Let me ask you this. It sounds like that could be an opportunity for yourself to possibly create a schooling or an institute where you can kind of create a feeder system for doctors to do be more challenged and help guide their path.
Well, the goal is to recruit doctors as they're getting out of school. We would be looking at doctors of physical therapy, such as in Wheeling, LECOM, which is the Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine, or chiropractic colleges or medical colleges, because essentially, like Dr. Muhammad said, we've created a new specialty. And he said, that's rare in medicine. Rarely is there a new specialty created. So we've created a new specialty. Now we have to fill that with practitioners because more and more people want this treatment. 1 week in here, we had 3 people from Texas and a lady from Jamaica, from Alaska in here. And we just finished a girl from Arizona. So, they're coming because there's 3 kinds of people that come in the office. One is somebody who's so bad, they'll just do anything they can to get better. They don't care because they're just so bad. The second one is somebody who gets a referral from somebody they trust. And then the third is moms are the healthcare providers for their family. Moms say, you're going to go there. That's where you go. Moms are the healthcare consumers.
So then how many doctors are currently practicing this method that you are practicing?
None right now, which is why there's an urgency to start training people. When unfortunately Dan passed away, that really put a slowdown, but gave us these last 2 years to do the research study with Wheeling. It was an ongoing process, and Dr. Hadadzadeh and Dr. Gruber are just remarkable in their fields. And the students were telling me that they actually rewrote the research papers 47 times. But that's what experienced researchers do, which is really good for us. That's what's needed. You want it to be airtight, and you want to be able to prove what you've known for 30 years, what we've known.
I can imagine how frustrating that is, though, because the cultural dogmas are so strong in this country. When they kind of get those things set in their mind, they're not budging off that core belief. And the intellect of which you have, the resources you have, the background you have, this is the real deal. This is how things evolve. You're a bit of a Thomas Edison of sorts, creating your own niche within the medicine. We need to get the word out on yourself and what it is you're doing, because this is beyond fascinating. It works. It's the direction that medicine's heading in the modern era.
And that's why we're excited about the study with Wheeling University's PT school, because it's actually saying, okay, what this guy's been doing for 35 years really does work. And before that, all you hear is, oh, well, it's anecdotal. Well, it really wasn't anecdotal. We had independent objective analysis pre and post of patients of mine done by other people, but it wasn't put together as a research study. So it's amazing to me because I'm watching all this unfold with COVID, and it's kind of coming to light, because that was the criticism Dr. Fauci made of hydrochloroquine. He said, well, it's anecdotal and we don't know the long-term effects. And the doctors are saying, well, no, anecdotal is one person tells a story. But their arguments were, for a lot of the COVID treatments that people are saying are successful, is, no, this has happened to 50 people here and 100 people here, and this is the result. So that no longer becomes anecdotal. No, did it go through rigorous peer-reviewed studies? No. What point does it not become anecdotal? When you're sick, you want to do whatever it can help. So we've gotten past that now with our study. Nobody can any longer say it's anecdotal. But after 35 years of the same results over and over that have been tested pre and post by independent objective analysis, we knew it. This is really good for us, because now it's passing the sniff test with the formal research studies, and 3 of them right out of the bat. So,
that's great news. That's really good to hear.
If you are listening from Australia, Florida, or just from around the corner,
From East Coast to West Coast outlets, if you're not to the dirty South straight, make a left and body.
contact us. Leave your mark with your host, Vince Cortese.
Tell me about a patient that touched your heart, and tell me about that patient changed your practice.
Oh, I actually have one. He was a college football player who was an offensive lineman, about 6'6", about 350 pounds. When he was done with his treatment, he got emotional and actually started crying and asked me to take a picture with him and hug me. And he since has realized that his brain is more valuable than football, and he wants to be a doctor now. And
Wow.
I heard he wants to do this, which was really neat.
That is neat.
But you don't expect this big hulk of a man to be so happy that he gets emotional. Yeah.
Yeah, they're larger than us as fans, admirers. So to see that gentle side or that human side, we don't bring that into that image we have of them.
Right.
It's always heartwarming. What impact has your mother on shaping your life today?
She is probably the single finest person I've known. She's moral. She's good in every way. Her kids are ultimately important to her. And no matter if you're going through a bad time in your life, she was very positive in every way. She's absolutely the best role model any child could have had. And ironically, I met my wife, and my wife is a lot like her. And the 2 of them have a mutual admiration society, which I really, really like.
That's how it should be.
Yes.
If you could do anything to improve health or health care in rural America, what would you do?
In rural America,
Yes.
I would probably get back to the way things were when I was growing up. We had our own garden. We grew our own food. There were no pesticides. My grandmother had a farm. We had our own chickens. We had fresh milk, beef. We had a spring steer and a fall steer. We knew they grazed, and things were just less processed, and the chickens laid eggs. And you could see a difference in the eggs, just the color of the yolk. I mean, just picking food out of your own garden and eating it when it's in season, it was just phenomenal. And then we had prune tree, a cherry tree, a peach.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just phenomenal. I can remember as kids sitting in a cherry tree with my cousins and eating them until you got sick.
Belly hurt.
But you went after the darker cherries because they were ripe, but things were simpler and the food was more wholesome and more nutritionally laden. And that's probably what I would do in rural America.
In your practice, what is the best compliment you ever received? It's not touching on that other fella, that big guy.
Probably the best compliment I have ever received was another physician was speaking with my father, and my father asked him if he had children. And he said, "No, I don't have any children, but if I had one, I'd want one just like your son."
Oh, nice.
Which was a huge compliment, stayed with me forever.
Yeah. Do you have any trade secrets for us today?
As a professional, people are nervous when they go to the doctor. And I can remember as a kid when I went to the doctor, it was just unsettling going into a sterile environment, and the staff was behind a door with frosted glass window, and you didn't know if they were there or not. And we have an open environment here. My staff is 4 highly trained, very professional women who are also very warm, and they make our patients feel warm and almost like family. So when people are done with their treatment, they almost feel bad leaving because it's been such a good experience. And you've been in the office, how it's all open and the patients talk and share things, and the staff makes them feel very at home, almost like they're coming into our house.
Yes, that's true. I experienced that. I can vouch for you. If you were to have dinner with 3 people who are dead or alive, who would you pick and why?
I would have, one would be Dr. Carl Ferrari, who was the mentor who developed all of this. He was the most brilliant medical mind I've ever dealt with. He was truly the precedent for everything we do. And I told him when he was alive, I wanted to put him in a lab and just let him develop things until he could get the most out of him while he's alive, because he was just an innovator and thought through medical problems logically, in a very logical fashion, and based it on science. And a lot of it didn't go back to research. It went back to physiology and anatomy textbooks. I would like to spend more time with him. Another one is my brother, who passed away a few years ago. And the third one would be my wife. Spending time with her is probably the best time I could ever spend with them.
Wow. Okay. All right. That was going to loosen us up a little bit here. And this is just for trivia's sake. Do pineapples belong on pizza?
Yes.
You like pineapple on pizza?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything's fair game. Like, I think anything goes on pizza. And
Okay.
food is fair game for breakfast, even sushi.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Sushi for breakfast.
Oh, yeah. Anything's good to fry, scramble with eggs.
Oh, yeah. I
Doesn't matter. Leftover Chinese. Yeah.
Today's guest on Leave Your Mark, Dr. Charles Simkovich. He has treated patients in 38 states in the United States and 8 different countries global. He's treated some professional athletes. Professional boxer Roy Jones Jr. is probably one of the most prominent. Go for a Google search under Dr. Charles Simkovich, Simkovich. You will literally get a library of information on him. I'd like to give you his office number here locally in the Wexford area. It's 412-366-3700, and he has a newly revamped website. It provides quite a bit of information under Simkovich Concussion Institute.com. Thank you all for listening. I look for more exciting stories from Dr. Simkovich in years to come and what they'll be capable of doing next. Thanks for listening to Leave Your Mark today. Tune into our next episode of Leave Your Mark with Vince Cortese. Be blessed.
You just left your mark. Thanks for listening. Listen to more episodes on demand. Just click Leave Your Mark with Vince Cortese. If you have a story to share, tell us. How are you going to leave your mark? Contact us. Leave Your Mark with our host Vince Cortese. Be our guest.